Most Africans believe that the Christian religion came from Europe, but it is actually a lie. And most people that say that have watched a lot of YouTube videos based on theories and conspiracies of Christianity or whatever they have watched based on the Vatican or the Roman Catholic. So they usually put the Bible and the Roman Catholic in the first in the same plate, or they usually put these things together, of which it doesn't work that way, and it has never worked that way, because that is not just true. Why? Because if we want to look at when was the date they actually started allowing Christianity in Europe, it was around 300 years later, after they had been persecuting Christians for about 300 years. So most of the Christians that were being persecuted during those 300 years, some of them fled into Egypt and started living in caves. That's when they actually started writing the first Bible, and some of them fled to Ethiopia. So that is the reason why Ethiopia was actually never colonized during the era of colonization, because it had known already the morals and the principles of the Christian way, because it had lived in that kind of a life for over 2,000 years. So most people that come with this bias, they are trying to deny the existence of Christianity in Africa before it came from Europe, and they are trying to actually encourage the African cultures and cults and whatever it is that they are trying to encourage. That we are actually saying, most people usually say that we are not living up to our culture, or this is not our culture, or that is not our culture, or that is not our tradition. But it is actually not. It might be true. It might be true to some extent, because if you look at the in the world of Nigeria, in terms of religions, cults, and all of this, it's either you are down for God, or you are down for the dark side. You have to choose which side are you on. But for most Africans that have been going through this road, they actually are not verifying most of the facts, because in every country, in every state, or in every religion, there's a moment where there is the conversion or the evolving of a culture. When a culture evolves, it starts taking some of the influences and the practices of other cultures, and it starts mixing and mingle with its own. At some point, there's a need to improve there. If not for the Christian, if not for those that came, let's say missionaries that came 200 years ago, although most of these missionaries that came out 200 years before the colonization were actually under the idea that themselves were serving a higher purpose by leading first into the mission, and then the colonizers followed. But the mistake that they did, most of them, it was not even a mistake, because most of them, they actually realized that most of these African cultures that they were coming to were not very, very much far from the idea of God, or who was God. In my language, we call God Mwari, and Mwari, he has been called Mwari for like thousands and thousands of years. My God is the same God who has been talked about in the Bible. It's just that how are we gonna use it? Like, look, nowadays, most people complain about how much there's false prophets, and how much this is not an African culture. Hey, that it came from Europe. Now, because we were colonized, we are now refusing our own cultures, saying our those that came from Europe are better cultures, or those that are coming from other parts of the world are better cultures. But without actually us looking into our own cultures, the cultures that we lived before this culture that we are currently living in, or the traditions and the principles that we found ourselves in, and we are making them our cultures. Those people are usually telling this big lie, because if you want to understand, when they tell you that we are taking other people's cultures and this is not our cultures, let's look at what we call our cultures. Okay, let's remove Christianity from the way, and the morals and the principles, is that it brought in Africa. Um, our own African traditions, we have had strong traditions, very, very strong traditions, and some of these traditions, when someone is born a twin, one must be killed in the process so that they can save the other one. This is where I'm coming from. And with that in mind, we should understand that those people that we were calling the ones that had proper cultures, the ones that were living the proper way, actually never had proper cultures, because proper cultures are the ones that are coming into being today. And those proper cultures we are learning today should be the cultures that we should put forward and actually understand the difference between our old cultures and the new cultures and the arising cultures as well. Because where we are coming from, let's look at the point of if Chaka, let's say Chaka was a Christian, if Chaka was a Christian, right? Would he have buried those 10 girls with him? I mean, a true person, a person who had learned the true principles, because everyone can say they're a Christian or they can take this flag of a religion. We've seen that happening in Islam, where most people that are the people that are pushing the agenda of saying we are Islam, the Islamic nation, that are not actually standing with the values that it had been teaching, are the ones that it had caused the jihadists, the Boko Haram, the whatever, the ISIS, whatever terrorist groups that are out there, and those people that are pushing forward the agenda of their own perspective in a religion are the same people with the same ideas, like how it was done after 300 years when Christians were being persecuted while living in caves. And when they were living in caves, they were living in Egypt, they were living in Ethiopia, they were living in many parts of Africa, because in Israel they were being killed by the Jews that were there. They had started this thing called blasphemers because they were praising Christ and all of that. So they couldn't stay safe in Israel. So they couldn't even stay safe in the Roman world. Because the Roman world, we had Caesar at the top and the rest, and had a lot of idol worshiping, which is why later on you realize that most Christians that came into being and started fighting the idea of saying there's a delusion here. These guys, what they are teaching and what they are putting forward is a big delusion. They are lying to most people, and when we realize that they were lying to most people, that's when it became open. But to say that Christianity was only brought through colonization or was brought from Europe, it's actually a lie. It might have We might have known it from the European descendants, but we weren't actually in that period of time where it had been here before and it left here to go to Europe. That's when it extended and it grew much power because it was being used by the kings and the empire and the emperors that were there to control people, same as how the religion controls the people today in the world. Which is why we think most of the African problems that has to do with religion are mostly coming from the descendant of the Roman Catholics, the ones that started this thing of tithing people in church in order to fund their own lives and their own perspective of the world. Which is the reason why today, if you want to check, let's come back here in Africa. If you want to check what we are actually doing today, it has to do with something that has to be religion. It has to do with something that maybe not moves away from religion, but it follows those kinds of principles. Christianity actually didn't start in Europe. It started in Israel. Then it was all the Bible. Most of the books that in the Bible were collected here in Africa because that's where they were written in caves in Egypt. So most people that go critically, that are critics of the Christian world, coming from the African cultures and the African tradition, you should know that the African tradition and the African cultures that were there, they were totally. Sometimes you might perceive them as good, but to others they were an abomination, because if you want to check what these people, okay, 400 years ago, what we were practicing, not all practices were bad, because we had most people that were living in Africa in terms of cultures, they would understand there was a principle, there was a line that you should not cross, and that line is a general line in life. It doesn't have anything to do with being rich or being poor. General bets in life, either you are black or you are whatever color you want to choose, right? Then the next lie that also looks like that one is the lie about that in Africa is the most corrupt leaders in the world. Let's look at other countries in the world that have managed to acquire wealth. They've absolutely managed to acquire wealth by killing those that have it. So it is not true when we say that Africans basically kill other Africans who become successful. It's not an African thing, or is it a race thing? It's not that. It's actually a universal thing that comes with every race and with any individual, because it has nothing to do with which people or what people or who. those people. It has something to do with us as humans. It has something to do, it has more to do with our human hearts. That's the truth about it. There's no inferiority complexity in the world, but it's just that we create it. We create it in a way that suits our behaviors, that suits our ways, that suits what we believe in. Because most people that have come across with inferiority in complexity are those people that truly needed help or to be saved from it. So when we talk about to say most people that are in Africa may kill each other because that's what inferiority complexity means, but it is not true because most people that have gone into power positions, countries that have become superpowers today, they became superpowers by killing those that had what they want and they take for themselves. It's called most people they joke about it and say the American way, because most people that comes along in this world in search of power, you don't have to be of whatever skin for you to search power. So which means you don't have to be of whatever skin for you to be corrupt and to be considered corrupt. Because most, I can say to me, I think African governments might actually be the least corrupt because they actually do not have so much to be corrupted. Those governments that are highly corrupt are the ones that can manage to hide what they are doing in plain sight, even if we know you cannot control it or you cannot take it away from them. And most of those governments are the governments that are considered corrupt. Let's look at those governments that are called, are said to be very corrupt. Uh, Nigeria is said to be one of the African most corrupt countries, right? But if you want to check, how long have been Nigeria under colonization, after colonization? How long did it stay of colonization? And can you compare Nigeria to other countries that went through the age of colonization and they were the colonizers, not the colonized? Can you compare those people with the people that actually went through the colonization problem? You can't. It's totally hard to compare those two. But this is what we have been trying to do. We have been trying to force this idea of Africanization to everyone to think that the idea of Africanization exists, of which the idea of Africanization only exists in our minds. That is the reason why we are pushing the unification of Africa in order for us to bring about the existence of Africanization. So when we say Africans kill those Africans that become more, it's just that this idea of us becoming successful, when you become successful in a poor class or the middle class, but mostly let's discuss about the poor class. When you become wealthy in the poor class, you don't become so much wealthy because you have so many people to feed, you have so many people to help. This is what most people call the black taxi, and we have lived to see it and how much it has this obstacle in terms of making one individual grow at once. When that is when we bring about the idea of Ubuntu. I am because you are because I am. But this is what we are perceiving as ourselves. This is what we are pushing forward. But it was not true that we would kill those that become successful. Yeah, it is okay that most people in the world that become successful, some of them didn't become successful through clean ways. Some of them murdered people. Some of them did these horrible things. But if you want to check, all those that did these horrible things had a goal in mind. That goal was not to help their people, was to make themselves rich using those people. So this is what most people haven't learned, and this is what we should actually learn and teach those that are around us. Because if we do not teach the idea of saying we can lie to ourselves and have so much negative words in our literature, like this kind of talk when you say Africans kill those Africans, other African who become successful, is much embedded in our language, in our speech, and the way that we speak out to the world. And what is worse is that most people they do not actually understand that what we say is powerful enough to change the world. What we say is powerful enough to change us as individuals. So mostly the negative talk that is embedded in the African culture today or in the African language has something to do with the negative perspective of the African people, not the positive side of it. And it also brings about the ideas of having the messianic ideas of saying that one man is going to save most or one man is going to save many. But this has been a lie, and it will remain a lie for many years to come. One man who was supposed to save the world already did, and is going to come. That's the only man that exist in my library. Besides that, others are nothing, and whatever they are trying to do is going to pass away. Whatever buildings we build today, they are going to pass away. So when someone brings about the idea that Africa is the most corrupt leaders in the world, that would be a lie. And the most corrupt leaders are those that are actually making it, causing more poverty in the world, having these ideas of saying let's reduce the population by actually spilling more blood, funding more wars. And if you want to check the reason why they are funding all these wars, is because there's a greedy mindset. There's a lust in terms of needing much more and leaving others poor. So which means in Africa, where if we had the most corrupt leaders in Africa, we would have found most of African countries in war today, like they were in war 40 years back, or they were in war 50 years back, or 80 years back. And you will have to consider that what was the reason why most African countries that were colonized managed to uncolonize themselves with the help of one of each other. How did they come together to fight this one enemy? This is what most people should understand, that whenever people come together and they fight this kind of an enemy, right? What happens when after they fought the enemies, that they start fighting against one another based on principalities of understanding what is it that brought us together? Can this what has brought us together, now that it doesn't exist, can it still keep us together? That doesn't happen often, so it usually leads to wars. And wars are part of the human way of survival. They are part of this nature of ours, that we seek to see more blood. So it is not fair to say actually African leaders are the most corrupt in the world, and it is not also fair to say Africans actually kill other Africans that become successful. Why? Because most talk that you hear about Mnyama, blood, they do this, they do, is this negative talk that was embedded in our language. So to actually beat it, we should actually move forward and start talking about the positive stuff that is found amongst African people, the peace, the love, and the unity that they once had, or they are going to have, or they currently have. Because most people, when we talk about the unification of Africa, not everyone likes that idea. Not everyone likes that idea, and not everyone goes for that idea, but most of these people that actually do not understand about this idea is just that they are pushing this idea out of their own negative feelings, or positive feelings, but whatever feelings that they are pushing this idea from, they actually have it against someone, or somewhere. It's not something that them themselves have think about, have read about, have done enough research to say, no, this is a bad idea. Why, Craig? Because A, B, and C and D will happen. The people that are usually fighting these ideas of unity are those people that were affected truly by colonization, the people that were truly affected by slavery, the people that were truly affected by the inferiority complexity mentality, which is a disease. And those people are the people that come today and tell you those negative words, like Africans kill other Africans that become successful. Africans do not support other Africans in terms of business, or B and C. But all these things that they say, they usually not true or not fair enough to talk, to say it in that way. How can we have how can we support African businesses when the people that are actually in Africa and the kind of businesses that we are trying to support are not helping them out of poverty, or they are actually putting them more in poverty? And some of them, since they cannot afford international services, we try to provide these international services to one another. You also realize, even if we, no matter how much we want to do the best, there is no room, or there's no environment here to do the most. All Nigerian young people that are living through the desert in Libya, just for them to catch one of those boats going to Europe, or in Spain, to come and stay home, and in order for them to build actually Nigerian businesses, and for them to grow Nigeria. And even if he wants that, that's a good wish. But the thing is, there are many forces that are fighting him, not just in Nigeria, but also in Africa. Not just in Africa, but around the world. And these forces are those forces of either people are either going to come up together, or they have to come up one. And if people have to come up one, there's going to be a bitter competition. And a bitter competition doesn't have to be either coming from Europe or coming from China or coming from South America or North America, but it is usually happening from we ourselves as individuals. We have these competitive ideas against one another. We have this thing that we go against one another, no matter if it's going to benefit you or it's going to benefit me more. And those ideas are the reasons why most people that try to do the best, they are not seen as much like they are doing the best, because not they don't have so much support whenever they are doing whatever they are doing, because most people cannot afford to actually promote them or to help them succeed to go forward, because the community as a whole has been much affected. There's a story that I once heard. I was told by this man. He was around 72 years old, and he was like, "Son, you should understand things from where we are coming from and where we are going, and you should learn more about Africa and the way that it goes forward and how it came to be the way we are." And most people will tell you that Africa is the new continent or whatsoever, but it's one of the oldest. It's not one of the oldest, it's actually the oldest in the world. And it is one of the most oldest civilizations in the world. So that when you start understanding what is happening, you have to understand how all these civilizations have evolved from one type of civilization to another over and over and over and over. And you also gave an impractical example. He said, look at a European mother or a Caucasian mother, right? She has a son named Peter, and if you want to understand, she has a strong character, and she has been divorced 4 times, and she has a son called Peter. Then Peter goes to school, and he comes back with a new pen, and she sees the pen, and she asked him, "Oh, Peter, where did you get this pen?" And Peter says, "Mom, well, my friend John gave me." And she's like, "Okay, okay, that's okay." Then comes an Asian mother, and she has a son named Tyrese. And Tyrese comes home. I don't know what kind of an Asian mother we have named her son named Tyrese, but there is one, she exists, right? And then Tyrese comes home with a pen, and then she says, "Where did you get this pen, Tyrese?" And Tyrese says, "From my friend in school." And the next thing she does is that she waits for the husband, and the husband comes in and says, "Okay." He said that his friend gave him in school, and the mother agrees. Yes, yes. He said his friend gave him in school. So the husband then says this: go with him to the school tomorrow and actually see if this friend does exist, and if he didn't steal the pen, and he actually someone actually gave him the pen. This is what happens to Tyrese. The next morning, the mother wakes up and she goes on to see Tyrese in school, and then she realized, oh, that friend of him also, he gave him that pen. And then she herself, she's not dependent on the decisions that she makes, so she has to wait for the husband to completely make the proper decision, even if no matter how small what was happening, no matter how small was the situation. And then comes this African mother, and she has a son named John. Then this is what happens to John. John goes to school, and John comes back to school with a pen, and she gets so excited. And to ask John, where did you get the pen? She barely asked that question, but then John says, "I found the pen from one of my friends in school," and she gets excited, and she's like, "Wow, now I know, my son, you are able to take care of yourself." She's so excited. So that is the reason why, mostly, if you want to check for African mothers and African women that were affected, they were not affected by the fact that uh, most like all around the world where there is so much abuse, but they were affected mentally, and when they were affected mentally, they were affected not by other people but by other males, by African males, where they were forced to be more agreeable in terms of marriages. That's why it was so easy to marry 3 to 5 wives, 8 wives, 10 wives. Here in Africa is still possible. And if you want to check, even if women, more girls sees that they're still feeling comfortable into going into that relationship. It's not bad. There nothing is wrong with that if this is what you want for your life. Like other kids and male kids that were raised in those households, they were taught fear, and then when they were taught fear, they actually became an example and started giving out fear and feeding out fear to the world. This is what happened between these three mothers. So they were all to be judged with their characters and how strong character they were and how dependent they will go. And it was actually found out that the African mother was the least to be independent or to go that far, but not anymore, because now there's ideas that are coming in, and there's this rising of feminism and the understanding that girls can no longer say engineering is for boys or mathematics is for boys or success is for boys, or that they back in the day when they used to wait for marriages, but now it's all upside down. When they then themselves, they're taking charges, they're becoming responsible to go forward and say, I want that, I want this, I want that, I want to achieve that. And that gives them this power of taking charge, of which this taking charge was not there before, which was easier to be agreeable to whatever the husband says, which is now still in effect in the Asian world, where the mother is still dependent on the husband, even no matter the husband is not saying something that will help, or is not doing something that will help their marriage or that will help their relationship grow. So these were most of the lies that were lied to, and the lie that came with the inferiority mentality became much huge, that it dug itself and created roots. Now you want to. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he was like, "Oh, Africa is so difficult right now with everything that is going on, man. Africa is so difficult." And I couldn't believe what he said next. He said, I wish if it was back in the days of colonization, when all things were running around, when all things were proper. Then before I answered this question, I also thought of people like Mandela, people like Steve Biko, people like Mugabe, people like Gaddafi, all these people that existed during the time of colonization, and the type of strength that they had to push these ideas and these agendas away, because they grew up and they were raised in such an environment that was hostile and wicked, so they knew what was not to do and they knew what to do, and even if it was scary to do it, they still went forward and did the best that they could. This was for few people that were understood that colonization was the worst, and those people that actually understand that it was the worst, they were the ones that went forward to change things. But when you hear someone today who was born free and saying that it's better we go back to the days of colonization, it was way better there, jobs were still available and blah blah. But if you want to check jobs that were available back then were not innovative jobs. The reason why most African families are poor today is because the jobs that were being provided, they were limited to them to have some sort of an idea of their own kind of thinking, to be innovative enough for them to change their own world, their own small worlds. But that didn't happen so much. So what they did was they made themselves adapt to what was there, and if they had not done that, they would have been living today in a world that is segregated, and segregation would have been uh, taken as a way of life. Segregation would have been understood as a way of life. So when we have negative words in our literature, what we are just doing is we are saying to the entire world, "Oh, look at me, I'm naked and I love it." And what we are trying to do is to pose this positive picture where you are wearing this gold robe, and it's surrounding your body, and you have these gold necklaces and chains and braces and watches, and you are looking all these flamish, and but at the end of the day, all you are just saying is that even no matter what I'm wearing this, I'm wearing like that. It might looks appearing to you, but at the end of the day, I'm truly naked inside. I'm not wearing anything, or and you are allowing the whole world to see how naked you are and how naked your family is. That was some of the much language that was embedded of saying that the people kill other African people who become successful. Every nation in the world has existed on the ideas of them killing each other in the game of success to see who goes forward and who doesn't. Because it is not for everyone. So, which means it has to be very, very competitive, and there should be slim chances for you to go forward beyond what you have learned and what you have been taught. So with that, we should actually check our facts before we go forward and speak about them, and we should be careful of what we are saying, because sometimes we do not think, we just say these things maybe in order for us to impress our friends, for us to impress those that are around us. But at the end of the day, you realize that what you are saying is just making you more naked. And Dr. Peterson would say that stop saying things that makes you weak, because if you say things that makes you weak, you are like, let's go, you're like this bastard who goes on and speaks badly about his wife and say my wife is a ratchet, my wife is bad. And if you want to check that person who's saying that he married that side of his flesh, he's saying things about his own flesh. So which means no matter what he says about his wife, no matter how bad his wife is, he's just saying my reflection is so wicked and so bad that it should be cast into the fire and then it should burn off. This is it. And if you actually do not understand what this all means and how much negativity that we share if we are not careful of what we are saying, then we are always going to be behind and not forward, because we are not placed behind, but we rather put ourselves behind instead of putting ourselves in the front end, making and prioritize yourselves, or prioritizing yourself and saying, I am number one, not number 30. I am going to be the first and not the last. Because if you do not do that for yourself, then who are you expecting to do it for you? Which is the reason why whenever we are pushing the idea of the unification of Africa, we are trying to bring about the Africanization of the mind into real power, because there is no existence of the African culture or the African traditions or whatever they have painted and been telling people that this is how the African people have lived. If it has been the proper way that the African people have lived for thousands of years, why today, if you try to explain that same culture that we were doing 500 or 300 or 200, maybe 50 years ago, is today seem irrelevant? Let's look at even Lobola. No matter how much people want to pay Lobola, but there are so many young girls that are getting pregnant out there, and this is leading to abortion and higher rates of abortion, because they understand they cannot take in a husband who has not come and be submissive to their parents and they have paid what is due to them. But these are reasons and these traditions, we are actually affecting more of the next generation more than we are building it. We are not helping anyone more than we are destroying many. So in that we understand where we are coming and where we are going, and we have to keep that in mind always. And it won't be easy. It won't be easy. It has never been easier. But if we actually start reading and actually checking out facts before we go forward, then we would understand it's not about a man, it's not about one man or two men or three men. But although individualism matters, let's never ever ever deny what you actually do not understand, because most of the African civilizations that have existed before 2000 years ago existed in full power, and most of them existed way, 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 way before any empire had been built in the world. So, which is the reason why today we look at the world from our own perspective, and we want to share that perspective with the rest of the world. But sometimes it is difficult to share it when you actually do not know what you're trying to share or what is it that you are trying to give out to the world. And this has been the reason why most Africans actually do not understand where the culture came from and where the culture is going and how we can actually make it better, not just for ourselves but for those that are around us and those that loved us most. Because those that are loved us most are the ones that we affect when we are so in denial of the existence of our own power and our own authority. So how do we bring about your own existence into power? By not speaking what is negative of your own nature, because what is negative of your own nature, once you start speaking about it, even if it's a lie or it's not even fair, it comes into existence and it comes into real power. All the civilizations that have existed in the world are all imperfect, because they are human structures, they are doomed to corruption. So if you want to understand, there's no one government in this world that will tell you we are less corrupt when their hands were not once in blood, or they're trying to redeem themselves from whatever massacres they did before. So this is the reason why you should understand that there is no inferiority complex in this world. It doesn't mean if a civilization is smaller or the other civilization that is great is greater and more superior, which is the reason why once you have become more greater and more superior, you are actually by Jesus' words, you are the inferior one. Because when you go through that process, you go through a lot of challenges, and these challenges actually destroy some parts of you. So these are the parts that you lose. So when we say we have an inferior civilization, it also means we have a greater civilizations in terms of spirituality, where people have not crossed the line that much, because great civilizations come to be so dominated by many cultures and many traditions that they lose the principles that they started with, which is the reason why if you want to check the USA today, it was built on the principles of Christianity, and today if you want to check, are they living up to those principles? Is the country living up to those principles? But mostly it is difficult to live up to those principles. So what you should understand about all these religions and all these political arenas is that they all started from an innocent perspective, but in the process they are damaged or they are changed by the perception that we give them or by what we take from them. But this is what most people have to understand, that we are not going where we are coming from, and where we are coming from, if we are actually not clear about where we are coming from, we rather not talk about it, we rather not have any idea about it, if you are not willing to go out there and actually seek the real truth and the false. Because if you just mumble and start gambling with the truth, you're going to end up actually believing in lie, and once you believe your own lie, you have more problems in your hands.